Daggerfall. Daggerfall. This game, in just 2 years after the first in the series, took the things in Arena that worked and built upon them in great ways, all while adding more to the series than ever before. Back in Arena, it was the very start of the Elder Scrolls. Because of that, they didn't have what I would call the Elder Scrolls personality. It's not like Bethesda woke up one day knowing what they wanted all the lore to be to begin with, and that's okay. In Daggerfall, we see more of what I like to call the true beginning of the Elder Scrolls world. Elements in the story of Daggerfall are carried forward far more than what Arena gave to the series. In Arena, we got the overall world locations of Tamriel, the various playable races, and only a few notable characters that are important to the lore. If you're curious about seeing what that game had to offer, I made a video on that specifically that you can go watch. That aside, what we're here for in this video is the sequel, Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall. So Daggerfall was released just 2 years after its predecessor by largely the same team at Bethesda, like Julian LaFay and Ted Peterson taking the helm like with Arena. Their goal was to create a game that gave players the feeling of playing a pen and paper RPG, but in computer form. What we got was what I would consider to be peak 90s fantasy RPG game design. Think everything that worked in Arena cranked up to 11 with extra sauce on top. Daggerfall was incredibly ambitious for its time. Even knowing that, we have to remember that this is still a game from 1996, so there's still a lot of things that are still very dated by today's standards. Game design has come a long way, but with Daggerfall, it feels like an ocean compared to Arena's pond. It's pretty clear that the devs knew what they wanted with the second entry in the franchise. Just like its predecessor, Daggerfall is also a DOS-based game. That said, there's a recreation of the game made in the Unity engine that a fan put together. Both versions are the exact same game, just the Unity version has a few more quality of life adjustments, like a better aspect ratio, and some stats that are actually accurate. The Unity version also has a slightly different look as the textures are made differently from its original counterpart. So out of both versions here, I chose to play the Unity game for this video. Both games are the same, so if you prefer the older art, the original version is free on Steam and GOG. The Unity version is also free on GOG. If you want to experience a great 90s old school RPG, choose whichever one interests you more. Daggerfall is the last game that was made by the original team. After this game came Morrowind. That was when Todd Howard had the reins of the franchise. But as a last hurrah, I'd say that Daggerfall is a great send-off game to play. A ton of elements from this game helped to shape the future of the series. Even though Bethesda Game Studios changes various elements of the future installments, you can still see how influential Daggerfall was in shaping the series. Morrowind taking probably the most elements from it than the next two. Daggerfall was made in a newer game engine, and boy does it show. Going from Arena's more archaic look and feel to something much greater. Being able to see further in front of you was astounding at the time. That's before even finding out that you could set your camera to your mouse movements. It was leaps and bounds greater than what came before. Honestly, if you enjoy Daggerfall, just know that all the main minds behind the game are now in their own studio called Once Lost Games. They're working on a game that is a spiritual successor to both Arena and Daggerfall called The Wayward Realms. After playing both Elder Scrolls 1 and 2, I can say that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how this new game turns out. So while I'm playing through the Unity version of Daggerfall, that means this is going over the features it has. If there are added quality of life gameplay features that weren't in the original, I won't know in this video, as this is the one I'm playing. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dive right in. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Daggerfall is huge. Like 210,000 square kilometers huge. And you can walk literally all of it. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want. You see that mountain over there? You can fall off of it and die, like I did while fast traveling one time. Oh. Well, back to my last save. There are so many locations in the game that you can go to. So many, in fact, that it's over 15,000 different points on the map. That can definitely make the map look way too cluttered, which can make it overwhelming. Thankfully, you could toggle some of the visible dots on it by clicking the buttons on the bottom, like dungeons and towns. It'll clean it up much more so you can actually see more specified locations that you want to go to. Hovering over the dots will tell you at the top of the screen what the location is called. If you're on a quest and need to go to a specific location, sure, you can search for it like that. But something better would be clicking on Find and typing the location name. There you are, you rascal. If you're not selected on one of the regions, you can see the whole map, and it's big. Remember when I said you could travel all of it? You can travel all of it. That sure is a lot of regions right there. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, a lot. Oh, and you have access to the islands in between as well. It's actually insane just how much map you have access to. Because of how spread out every location is, you do thankfully have the ability to fast travel. You can either choose a loading screen for instant fast travel, or you can be the cameraman for a fast car commercial. I do understand that having a huge map doesn't make a good game. While I find it great that I can go extremely far distances in-game, I do know that this won't be everyone's cup of tea. It'll add to the monotony of the game for some people. It's essentially an overwhelming feature that might turn some players away. Just know that everything is procedurally generated. It can look very copy-paste with just about anywhere else in the game, but you do have random discoveries you can find. Not to mention random encounters with enemies. The outside world isn't flat like Arena's world either. You have this revolutionary thing called hills that you can see and walk over. After playing Arena not too long ago and experiencing the same flat planes of existence, hopping out of the first dungeon in Daggerfall and seeing hills for the first time was actually a fantastic feeling. While obviously nothing special nowadays, I still had a moment when I saw the world for the first time. Now, I could keep talking about how huge, big, and insanely large the map is, but I'm pretty sure you understand that by now. So let's talk about combat. Melee combat in Daggerfall works the same as it does in Arena. You right-click your mouse and swing it like your life depended on it. I mean, in-game, your life does depend on it, so swing away, you warriors. While there are a lot of weapons in this game, their animations are only slightly different. They all swing the same way, just maybe at very slightly different angles. The main differences between the various weapons would actually come down to the weapon type damage differences, as well as the quality of the weapon, which adds to the damage the higher it is. Iron is the worst, and Daedric is the best of the best. While all the qualities are different colors, you have at least 4 different ones that you'll be doing double takes on, as their colors are so close to each other. Literally, 3 shades of gray and 1 black. While it's hard to mix those up with blue, green, and red, they certainly can be mistaken for each other a few times here and there. So watch out when you're picking up gear. Life is like a box of gray weapons. You never know what you're gonna get. I'm pretty sure that's the saying, right? I primarily used melee weapons with a bit of magic here and there to help get me out of some tight spaces. Speaking of magic, it has many uses in this game. Combat is an obvious part of it, so we'll start there since we're on the topic. There seems to be many damage and healing spells in the game that are great for the middle of combat. Being able to shoot an enemy from afar and then switching to melee to finish the job is a great feeling. But that's also something you get in plenty of games nowadays, so it's nothing too special. Though the ability to just quickly use a spell is great. You can select a single spell and then hit another button that's dedicated to recasting it. As long as you have your physical weapon pulled out, you'll never miss a beat in combat. It's actually some great synergy to use both types of damage. This wombo combo helped out when running through the same dungeon over and over again for money making and leveling purposes. We'll talk about the leveling system later. Outside of damaging spells, there's also a lot of utility spells you can use. For example, Levitate makes its return from Arena and is very much improved. Back in Arena, if you use the spell, what would happen is your character would hover a bit off the ground, and you would see an up and down animation simulating floating, and you would essentially fly over water and other terrain. In Daggerfall, you can now take full advantage of every direction available to you. That includes everything in the air. Need a quick way out of combat? Levitate. City locked you out for the night to fend for yourself? Levitate. Need to reach the top shelf? Levitate. It's so useful. As it turns out, paralysis is the bane of my existence. Just trying to fight something and then bam, you can't move or swing your weapon anymore. You know what you can do though? Throw magic still. Why you can't swing a sword, but you can still move your arms to cast spells, I'll never know. Regardless, it saved me from a ton of spider fights. Something I've heard that a lot of people liked in both of these games was making your own spells. While it was a bit technical in nature to understand, you can easily become overpowered with it. I kind of just stuck with the normal spells you could buy from the Mages Guild. Speaking of guilds, you can join them in this game. You have a reputation number set for you as you complete quests for them. As you go up in ranks with them, you get access to a variety of services they provide, from stuff like adding magical properties to your gear, all the way to summoning the many Daedric princes themselves. A high reputation with any guild is only beneficial to you. Reputations are a major factor in Daggerfall. Having a negative reputation will have the various factions in question not wanting to work with you. I once went into the negatives for a faction and was kicked out from being with them due to failing a quest. Thankfully, you can still build that reputation back up since they give quests to anyone with any standing. I did a quest for the Mages Guild to protect a piece of gear overnight for them. It was 3 in-game hours and I just had to fight 4 different thieves at the same time. Thankfully, it was fine because I beat them and just stared at the flame of all knowing. Just make sure you don't accidentally pick up the item you're supposed to be protecting. The reputation system definitely adds a level of complexity and role-playing to the game. It's a fantastic addition that, while not perfect, has been iterated on by other games since then, not just in the Elder Scrolls universe. Alright, let's talk about leveling in Daggerfall. So normally in a video game, all you have to do is complete some quests and kill some enemies to get experience for an arbitrary number to level up and increase your stats and skills. In Daggerfall, from what I've looked up to understand, you would level from raising certain types of skills instead. So what I found was, in order to level, you needed to raise the skills on 3 primary skills, 2 of your highest major skills, and the highest minor skill. As you rank these up, and the skills in question vary from player to player, you do actually get experience towards your next level. It seems it was made with the intention of rewarding players for playing however they liked. But adversely, from this system, you could go quite some time without actually leveling up at all. And boy, do you need to rank up your skills. The lower your skill is, the easier it is to miss hitting your enemies. While spells are aim-based, swinging a melee weapon is skill-based. Quite literally, what some would call a skill issue. Not leveling up doesn't help when you need to attain better gear, especially since you can't actually get higher quality gear without hitting certain levels. Coming across an enemy with underperforming weapons and armor can really lead to prolonged battles, or even a game over. Another thing that guilds do is offer the ability to train up some of your skills. This is another way to try and level up faster when you need to. It will cost a bit of money though, so be aware of that. So what else is leveling good for, you ask? Well, one of the main features of Daggerfall: dungeons. So dungeon crawling is still a big thing in the sequel to Arena. Maybe a little bit less so, as there is more of an emphasis on the story, side quests, and the open world than just the dungeons. But regardless, the dungeons are a fantastic way to get gold to afford actually paying for things. I found a very quick to run dungeon that gave me 4 loot spots in the same room. Just kill 2 enemies, which helps to level up my skills, grab the loot, head back to town, sell everything I don't need. Instant profit while leveling. The reason this worked the way it did is because once you leave a dungeon, everything respawns when you enter back in again. So at one point, I ended up getting myself stuck in a cage that was blocking my path. I tried to climb over it to no avail, only to find myself stuck inside. So I, kind of cheated to get out of it, so I wouldn't have to reload my last save. I turned on no clip and flew right through it. Don't worry, I turned it back off immediately. So glad I used it, because that cage was in the... Wait, what? I don't know what triggered that. Well, anyway, that aside, I did get curious to see outside of the dungeon walls. So I did what any normal person would do. I no-clipped my way out and saw something interesting. The dungeon I was in seemed like it went on forever. Not only that, but I'm pretty sure I found the very starting dungeon connected to the current one I was in, even though I was very far away from the starting dungeon. This could also explain all the various enemy noises you'll hear randomly, even when there's nothing else you can actually reach. So what is the reason for heading into dungeons then? Mostly loot, combat, the thrill of dungeon crawling, and quests telling you to go into them. Quests typically pay you money for completing an objective, often in a limited amount of time. You'll be given a reasonable amount of days to complete quests. Failure to do that will result in no reward and even negative reputation with a variety of parties. We know how good it is to have a good reputation with guilds. Not only can you receive quests by asking for them from guilds and strangers, but you can also be given some at random. This will happen while you're just walking around. You'll get a message blurb in front of your screen, and you can either accept it or decline it. This does help to make the world feel more dynamic, even though you don't see the one giving the quests. What? It's still a game from 1996. Can't have everything, of course. So if the game has quests in it, how is the story? Well, I liked it. I'm only going to go over the very beginning of the game, so no spoilers for anyone interested in trying out the game. You're a friend to the Emperor, Uriel Septim VII. You meet him in a dark room, which, by the way, was recorded live action. Nice touch for atmosphere. He then sends you on a quest to Daggerfall. His old friend, King Lysandus of Daggerfall, has passed away, yet his ghost still wanders Daggerfall in search of vengeance. We are tasked with finding out why and helping to release him from the world. He also gives us a more personal request to find a letter he sent to the Queen of Daggerfall. What? You didn't know this was the only mainline Elder Scrolls game where you don't start off as a prisoner? Well, now you know. So after you receive the quest, your character makes their way to Daggerfall by boat. Unfortunately, on the trip over, a storm hits and destroys your boat. You then manage to swim to a cave that then seals you in. You are alone in a dungeon. Just you, a fire, and a ton of enemies. This dungeon is very reminiscent of the prison you start out in Arena. It's expansive, you can easily die to enemies, and you know your main quest. Once you make your way out, it's now that you can fully see the outside world. Hills. Hills everywhere. So now that you know your quest is involved with Daggerfall, what better place to start trying to figure things out? Essentially, once you're out of the dungeon, you have many options available to you. You can go anywhere you want, do anything you want. It's up to you. This is where your journey begins in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. It's a pretty easy to understand story at the beginning, but the best part is that the main story does open up immensely. You have quite a few main quests that you can do, but at different times. Some are level locked so you can't progress without getting stronger. And believe me, you absolutely want to get stronger in this game. Daggerfall also has multiple endings. It's kind of crazy going from Arena having a single ending to Daggerfall having a lot more. Definitely a great thing when it comes to making your own story unique from your friends and other players. After all, having additional content is almost always a great thing. The reputation system seemingly locked me out of doing a specific quest chain. I say seemingly as I tried looking up why I wasn't receiving it, and from the looks of things, failing any guild quests puts you in negative reputation from the quest giver. This definitely added something unique to my playthrough, as now I can't do something that I'll have to fix on another character at some point. My only gripe with the reputation system is that you can only see what your reputation is with guilds. This doesn't help to know if I just need to wait for a quest to appear or determine that I'm locked out. I know there's a lot of different reputations in Daggerfall, so it may make it look cluttered if they showed it, but in this case, I'd rather sort through everything to find out if I'm just wasting my time or not. That aside, let's talk about a more unique element of the game. While playing, sometimes you'll see some yellow text pop up at the top of the screen. It's typically something to help set the atmosphere for the player, something to help with immersion and role-playing. Something like, if you're walking through a dungeon, you might read about a rat scurrying over your foot. This being a game from 1996, they obviously would have a tougher time showing that. It's there for the player to imagine the scenario should they choose to. The text is non-invasive, so if you're caught up in a fight, it won't block anything or make any noise that might confuse the player in the moment. The developers wanted to use elements of traditional pen and paper RPGs in Daggerfall. Those old school games were some inspiration for the team. Also, through this yellow text, I've come to notice that there are actually a ton of dead thieves lying about somewhere. Almost all the time it'll tell me, quote unquote, thief just died. Eesh. The Thieves Guild must be hurting for people right about now. And yes, you can in fact pet the animals. So as far as the story and setting go, I think they're actually in a good spot. Interesting stories with some twists in them. the main quest adding a lot of lore to the world, minor yet cool roleplay texts to set the atmosphere, and so on. The developers definitely went above and beyond what they could do for the game. Just don't expect a masterpiece in storytelling, of course, but definitely something that's good for its time. As for the gameplay, I think it's far and above what Arena had to offer. While newer games do tend to try and be bigger and better in every way from their earlier iterations, they don't always achieve that, let alone in just 2 years. The combat has a good feel to it, especially if you weave both magic and melee fighting. Add in the variety of quests and locations to explore, and you've got yourself a good old-school RPG to sink your teeth into. In my honest opinion, this is a fantastic entry into the Elder Scrolls franchise. It's on the tougher side for sure, but something that helped set the stage for the future of the series. Not only that, but if anyone is interested in trying out an old school RPG, this is a great one to try out. The developers definitely put love and care into crafting this ambitious title. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all liked the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section if you've played it, are curious about the game, or have a general hatred of video games from the 90s. And if you're curious about the first game of the franchise, I did a video on that one too. I hope you all have a great day. Adios.